everybody. Welcome back to the Psychedelics Today podcast with your host, David Drapkin. Today, we're talking with Lauren Katalinich and Anya Oleksiuk from Psychedelic Society in England. Welcome, Lauren and Anya.
Hi, David.
Lovely to see both of you. And I assume you're both in England at the moment. Whereabouts are you?
We're both in London.
Yeah. See, I'm from Birmingham. I'm a Brummie, but I know you don't both hail from England originally. So looking forward to getting to know you and Psychedelic Society. Maybe Anya, can we start with you if you want to tell our audience on a personal level who you are and what brought you to be working at Psychedelic Society?
Sure. It's a complicated question because I do so many things. I think mostly I'm a filmmaker, and I am also an event curator and presenter and host. And I'll call myself an educator because I'm very passionate about education. And in the society and outside of it, my main focus is on harm reduction and making sure people who take psychedelics do it safely and in a very beneficial way. And there's lots of interest in mental health and psychedelics because psychedelics helped me on my own journey healing from depression and complex PTSD. So just felt inspired to educate others about it, and been doing it since 2017.
And how long have you been in England for?
I think 18 years or
Wow.
19.
Wow.
This is home, definitely. I arrived here when I was 19, and I remember magic mushrooms were legal back then still, and cannabis was class C, I think. So heaven for me, coming from Poland, where you can go to jail for having, to prison, high security prison for having just tiny bit of cannabis. So I came to this country, thought, wow, this is freedom and liberty I haven't experienced before, and I called my mom and said I'm staying, and applied for university, and never went back to Poland. It's been 18 or 19 years, and I think I'm staying.
Wow. And you haven't been back to Poland in that time?
I've been back just shortly for holidays, but it's just, that's all. I tried actually to go back once. I went back for 3 months, got a job there and stuff. But after 3 months, I just cried every evening and wanted to go back to London because I missed the diversity that London gives you. London is such a diverse place, and you have so many opportunities here. And it's the most, to me, in Europe is the best place to live. But I might be biased, but I absolutely love it here.
Amazing. Wonderful. Thanks, Anya. And Lauren, lovely to see you. If you want to let people know who you are.
Yeah, my name's Lauren. I'm originally from Iowa, which is like a farm state in the middle of the U.S. And I moved to London about 5 years ago, and it was a really rough transition. I never lived in a city before, and just found the whole thing like just incredibly stimulating. All this sort of a dream life of art and culture, and but I found it difficult to meet people and to find a place and role in that, and got very into. I guess I became obsessed with the idea of wholeness and of individuation. Like I felt suddenly there were all these different parts of myself, and I wanted to find a way of holding all of them. And but it wasn't actually until I did psychedelics. I had never heard of them until about 3 years ago, over behest of a friend. So I did ayahuasca and had an incredible experience that really taught me the value of healing from the inside out, and my ability to do that. I've always been very bookish and kind of seeking answers from the outside, and that's really what led me to the Psychedelic Society, looking for ways to continue that inside out kind of journey, especially when it comes to mental health and depression, and got connected to many people in my life who struggle with addiction, especially. And I really feel very passionately about the potential of this for finally making a change and kind of healing some of our deep crises of disconnection and loneliness. So I work in communications and marketing. So I kind of came to transfer my skills from, that's what I've always worked in. But over time, I've developed that role a bit more to focus on community building and our membership program.
Thanks, Lauren. So both of you have different stories, but there's a common thread there that I'm sure you are aware of and have spoken about, kind of the role of psychedelics and finding home, finding community, finding wholeness. So maybe, Lauren, just, I don't know if you're able to just give a sense of that pursuit of wholeness, like from where you were looking and where you are looking now, or where have you found it to be? And you said that kind of going from the inside out. How are you feeling about it now with that wholeness?
I think it's just such it's always a struggle for people, because we do have contradictory parts of ourselves. And wholeness is kind of learning to accept that and make space for all of them to exist together. So I think for me, it's what's been wonderful as I've gotten a stronger sense of self through this journey is being part of a community like the Psychedelic Society, and is that suddenly I can be lots of different parts of myself. So I'm doing my marketing still, but I'm doing it related to something I'm passionate about. I've discovered dance as my main form of integration, ecstatic dance, which is also just suddenly everything seems connected and quite easy. And I think that's where that feeling of wholeness comes from. Versus feeling like I have all these different parts of my life. I have to go to work and it's not related to my passions outside of that. And it's not related to different friendship groups that have different interests. It's more connecting threads.
Yeah. It's nice to have that congruence between the parts, even if they are different. Yeah. And I'm just going to share, for me personally, I had a period in my life where my search for wholeness revolved around kind of being alone. So aloneness was my way of being whole, and it kind of made me feel quite secure, and led me into like a very hyper Buddhist kind of hippie world traveling pursuit. And it's been hard to kind of get out of that, even though it was wonderful to be in that kind of hyper solo mindset. It wasn't full, it wasn't whole, it was disconnected from real life. So yeah, I don't know if either of you can relate to that challenge of kind of doing the inner work on ourselves, and then how to actually kind of map that out in the real world with a job, with paying bills, with a community, with relationships.
I don't know about you, Anya. I feel like that's like the biggest challenge that's the challenge of integration, is you can, when you are in the spiritual realm, there's quite a big gap between the harshness of reality and the like elevated state that you're in, and you're trying to bring some of that into your personality, into your actions, so that it can guide you in the right direction, and so that you can have a sense of alignment. So I think it's important to have that knowledge that comes from being in the elevated state. If you're only on the other side, you get this crisis of meaning where, you have external things that you want, but you're not connected. But I think that's one of the biggest challenges, and then what we're trying to help people with is manifesting this beauty and perfection, really, that they've experienced, because it can be really harsh to come back. Having seen and felt the potential. Yeah.
We see that a lot in psychedelic integration circles, where people often come from studies, academic studies on universities, and psilocybin studies for anorexia, depression. and they had this glimpse of hope. But they come from a world usually where they probably never bought weed in their life. They don't know how to buy drugs. Those are people who have families and normal lives, and they've just been working in offices and stuff. And they given this glimpse of hope and those insights, but then they really struggle to keep it up. They struggle to keep up the being present and being mindful and all those, and contextualizing all those insights and taking them, manifesting them in your life. And they come often to us and they're quite bewildered because nobody from their community understands, their family, friends. They didn't have experiences like that. And they also cannot achieve this state of mind again because they don't even know how to buy drugs. So even if they wanted to, they couldn't do it. Not that we advise them to. But this is what they come to us with. And what we try to give them is space to contextualize those insights. So sharing circles, community meetings where they can meet other people who have similar experiences. But also what we give them is we try to teach them different techniques that are useful for integration and also introduce them to non-drug induced altered states of consciousness. So, for example, breath work, for example, going to gong bath, but so it's but mostly techniques like embodiment techniques, dance, play. We encourage them to explore their playfulness and meet people who they then can relate to. And we see a lot of those trial participants now 2 years later. They really embedded themselves in the community. They started some companies together with other people, businesses, organizations, relationships, friendships. So it's very beautiful. This is like wholeness, actually. They find a wholeness, then you can see them all. And there is also still some people who didn't embed themselves that much in any community. And we know, for sure, we know from the trials that most of those people slipped back into depression after a few months. So psilocybin helped them, but in the long term, they didn't have enough support and integration to keep the momentum going, and the self-love going.
That's amazing that you've been working with those people that were in the clinical trials, and I almost feel like it would be great to do a bit more research with them and their experiences, because yes, the psilocybin journeys and treatment are very powerful, and the protocols they've got are very well developed. But what happens afterwards? And I know I had a chat with Ros Watts a year or so ago, who I know you work with her quite a bit, and she was saying that a lot of the people in their Imperial College of London trials, they had their sessions in the clinical trial and it was really helpful, and then bang, the war on drugs is active again. No more clinical trial. It's therefore an illegal drug rather than a medicine being researched. And so their depression came back, and what are they able to do? And so I think the emphasis on integration is really key, because so many people just have these transformational experiences without necessarily a container in which to make sense of them, or to really know how to maintain that kind of openness. So it's great to hear what you're working on. Maybe it's a good time to talk about Psychedelic Society. If one of you would like to, just explain what it's about and what you do over there, please.
Yeah, sure. So our mission is kind of threefold. We say experience, so that's really where we're talking about offering these. One of the most beautiful things, I guess, about integration and all of this is that the path is different for everyone. So we have a huge range of events. Some people are wanting to explore intimacy or consciousness or embodiment. So we have a whole host of events around that kind of stuff, breathwork, and then also lectures and talks with researchers, kind of developments in the field. We just had our drug science symposium and are doing this actually a launch event with Ros Watts on Friday around her new integration program. And so that's the experience side. Then we have sorry.
That
No,
was education.
Education. Sorry. These
That's
second
okay. We'll
pillar,
edit
yeah,
that out.
yeah.
Experience all the
Experience, and then education. So this is like a lot of Anya's work has been really around how can we provide people with reliable information, or connect them with reliable sources of information on for harm reduction, especially, but just the nature of psychedelics, that these are, even if they read something that kind of hypes them up, that this is not a cure-all, and they require quite a lot of work, and it's really important to understand the way that they work and things like integration. And then the third pillar is community, and that is my focus, but all of our focus really on building a community of our members, and a place where people who, taking psychedelics can just really unmoor you. It means your values might be different and they don't match the way that you are living your life or the people that are around you in your life. And it's important that those structures, you can change those structures and meet people that will help you live the life that you want to live. So those are our, that's our mission: education, experience, and community. Yeah. Anya, do you want to add any more to that?
Thank you. Yeah, and how about what you do on the ground, say in England versus Europe, and like where might people see you physically? Like I know you've got a great website, but do you do any kind of in-person events that you kind of coordinate yourself, or is it more just other people's that you're kind of helping to promote?
It's both. We have amazing community of facilitators that run workshops in embodiment, intimacy, breathwork, you name it, we've got it. Anything connected in any way to psychedelic practices, we have it. But we also organize ourselves large events. We organized 3 symposiums so far. One was on ayahuasca in 2018, and recently was a psilocybin symposium. We featured most of the leaders of psychedelic research in the UK, including Rosalind Watts. And recently we had the Drug Police Symposium, where it was whole day filled with talking about the bad things and the hopeful things and how we can unite to make a change. Because at the moment, we'll probably speak about it later, but at the moment, UK drug situation is not how we would like it, So we organize those big things. This Friday, as Lauren mentioned, Rosalind Watts integration program launch. It's a massive event, 400 people. So we do a lot of those, and hopefully more and more. My biggest dream is to organize Women in Psychedelics conference in the UK next year. Hopefully in March, fingers crossed. We're just gonna try bigger and better, and we're cooking up a festival at some point to celebrate our, I think, 10th birthday. So watch this space. There will be a lot.
All right. Well, I think I could definitely come to that festival. When do you think that might be, and where could it be?
Most
The
likely
10th,
September.
actually, 10th anniversary. 10th year anniversary will be actually, I think, to 2024. So that's going to be the big one. But we will have some smaller celebration in November this year, I think.
Yeah. And that's where we would kind of like host all of our facilitators, regular, all the kind of regular events that we run. And kind of, I think the idea is that we'll explore, when we use the term psychedelic, we're using it to literally mean mind manifesting. So these non-psychoactive experiences around psychedelics, as Anya mentioned, I've had some of my deepest psychedelic experiences during breath work, actually, or gong baths and meditation, and kind of acknowledging the power of those. And also, so to to your question before, we used to have a physical space here in London, and I've heard loud and clear from the community that that is something that people want. Like, it's really nice to have a space where you can come, and I think there were wonderful things happening in that space. We had to close it due to COVID, and so I would say that finding a new space like that is something that's on our radar. So that would be like London or UK based. But the other part is we're launching a new online platform with Circle. That's a really lovely interactive space where members who are all over the world can have a quite immersive and connective experience with each other. I think you guys
That's
are on
great.
Circle.
Yeah, we've launched officially. It's a pretty soft launch because we're still kind of playing around with it and getting it set up. But yeah, the last few weeks we've welcomed our students on our Vital course. That's our 12-month course. They now have this kind of playground in Circle to share resources and to chat and form groups. And yeah, it seems like a nice place to form community, and we're going to be doing some in-person retreats and events at the end of the year too. So it's really important to have the in-person. I miss having a workplace and a people to drink tea with and just to see every day. So I do like working from home, but I think it's especially in the psychedelic space, that's part of the integration work, isn't it? Being around people that you feel safe with, that get you, even though you're a bit weird, they get you, and yeah.
Yeah, it's been
Yeah.
like such a joy to restart these members socials in person this year. So we're about to have our fifth one, and it was funny because at first we tried to schedule in like, oh, people might be interested in hearing a talk about integration and stuff, but really the feedback is it's not every day we get to be in a room with 40 other people who've taken a bunch of psychedelics and we really just want to talk to each other. And you can feel the energy in the room. Everyone is just really excited to connect. And I felt at the Drug Policy Symposium too, there were intentionally really long breaks for networking and chatting. And I could just hear the conversations, the kinds of things that people who've done psychedelics want to talk about are just extremely engrossing and heartfelt, but really like big ideas as well. So yeah, it's so nice to have that space in person again.
Yeah, and we don't just talk about psychedelics,
No.
We talk in a certain way about certain things. It's just a way of of being more expansive potentially and open to.
Yeah, I think like this, our values are actually connectedness, curiosity, and consciousness. And I feel those are the kinds of conversations that really typify these psychedelic gatherings. It's like, what are we really doing here? We really kind of want to get to because psychedelics open your mind to this truer reality and meaning and questioning in a wondrous and curious way. Those are the kinds of things they're sharing. They're not really talking about their trips so much.
Yeah, there's some real work to do. So maybe, Anya, if I can just ask a question for you. We're talking about before wholeness and all the different parts of us, and there's a lot of work to do, inner work and outer work, on community, on drug policy, just a lot of work around the world, just on every single level. What do you have any principles that are guiding you, or that you're using to guide the work that you're doing around the inner work and the outer work, just to look after yourself and stay true?
To look after myself, or to stay true. Something that is guiding my work will be care for accessibility. And it's something that drives me the most because I see psychedelics becoming something for very privileged people. We have ketamine clinics here charging £5,000 for session. Most people living in council apartments, they can't afford such things. They cannot afford therapy session for £50 an hour. How would they, afford something like that? So this is what drives me, is to make sure that everybody who needs it gets access to help they need. And it's psychedelics, but also events, education. That's why I always try to have cheap prices and loads of free tickets, and just trying our best to help in that, people who are not affluent. But what keeps me sane and safe myself, is, I suppose, real belief in those substances. I really saw a massive change, they've made. And they really inspire me to do this work. And all the practices I learned along the way, they keep me safe. My yoga, my gardening, my nature connectedness, my amazing community I built in the last 5 years of my life. I've built such a community around me. I have best friends. I love those people. They're so inspirational. And this is like keeps me going every day. Just all this love around me, and all those people reminding me every day that what we do is important, and that we're doing it together. With Rose Watts, she's one of my best friends. Michelle Baker Jones, she's one of my best friends. Massive love to them both. If they did not exist in my life, I would probably not be that well, mentally. Those two keep me sane, actually. So I'll just say it's Rose and Michelle that keep me sane, basically.
Beautiful. Yeah, and it's great to hear that you include other people in that piece about kind of looking after you and your sanity and keeping you true is other people. But yeah, it must be amazing being best mates with Ros Watts. Wow.
She's a wonderful friend, and so is Michelle. Yeah, I must say that psychedelic researchers in the UK are some of the most wonderful people I've ever met. Like, it's just a wonderful bunch of really caring people with amazing personalities. So come to UK, meet them. They're amazing, very accessible as well. So
Yeah, now's a good time perhaps just to ask about this reality in England, with psychedelics in the media. Perhaps how much are people hearing about it? Like, would the average person know about Ros Watts? And I've had my family back home kind of send me BBC TV shows about psychedelics, Imperial College trials. So, but where's it at? Like, if the barometer of on the streets around psychedelics.
I think we're in the beginning of mainstreaming, definitely. London, especially, it's people talk about it now. You hear people talking in the tube. It's always funny when I'm in the tube, in the underground subway, as you call it in States, and just hear people talking about psilocybin and LSD and depression trials. And randomly, I do meet people who know Psychedelic Society but completely don't know that I work there, and they talk to me about it. So it does happen. I heard about my documentary before from someone that didn't also know I'm making it. So it's coming around a bit more. Contrasting, I've been in Poland recently and just tried to talk to my one of my best friends on the street about psilocybin mushrooms. And as soon as I said mushrooms, she blushed and said, "Oh, porcini mushrooms," and made kind of a joke that they're just normal gourmet mushrooms. So in here, it's quite a trendy thing. But this is London. People have been taking drugs here since like forever. All amazing, so much amazing music comes from this place. It didn't come out of nowhere. There was a lot of cannabis and psychedelic influence and MDMA influence in the culture of this country. So yeah.
Yeah, it's a really good point actually. Just thinking about, when I was growing up, kind of the rave culture, the kind of late 80s, 90s. Yeah, that was a huge kind of cultural phenomenon with MDMA becoming mainstream. Yeah.
Exactly. So it's in the veins of this country. I would say, but also you see with talks that are being organized, more events, and even not just completely psychedelic science related stuff, but the amount of gong baths and ecstatic dances multiplied so much in the last 5 years. It was so hard to find anything 5 years ago, and now they're all over the internet and stuff. They're everywhere. So there's a massive change in shift in how people perceive psychedelics and psychedelic culture.
Have you thought why gong baths and ecstatic dances in particular are are popular over there, because it might be a cultural thing. Because over here in America, I'm in New Jersey, and I know of them, but yeah, I don't think they're happening quite so much over here. I wonder why it is over there, perhaps.
Well, it's easy. Ecstatic dance, raving, rave culture, that kind of works out, right? Gong bats, I'm not sure, but from what I understand from people, a lot of people get into psychedelic state with gong bats. Not sure
I
why.
do.
Is there some kind of... Yeah, go
Yeah,
on.
Lauren.
No, I do wonder if it's, I don't have any evidence, but it just seems like since COVID, uh, I've seen so many more offerings on the market, just because maybe people really did dive into, okay, I need some healing, and got quite into these sort of meditative practices. So, I mean, there's lots of YouTube videos where you can listen to gong bats, but it's much nicer to do it in person. I don't know about the US versus the UK, but ecstatic dance, same. I mean, that's really been my my main form of integration and healing. And a lot of the other dancers are kind of ex-ravers and stuff, who are now more conscious and just love moving and movement therapy. Um, I do. I think there's an acceptance. It was funny. Last time I went home, I decided to tell my parents that I work for the Psychedelic Society. And I didn't really know on this path to wholeness, and not kind of having divided selves. And they were just so open-minded. And I really think that that is an indicator of the mainstreaming. They both heard about psychedelics for depression and anxiety, and as kind of a healing tool, and really open-minded about kind of that spiritual side of them. And I think people are just curious. London obviously is a big city, so it's always going to be a bit easier here than in smaller places. I mean, when John Hopkins' album came out, it was like walking down the street, a giant billboard that says music for psychedelic therapy. It's like an ad for psychedelics for mental health. It's just really feels like it's everywhere.
Yeah, dance in particular. I'm really happy that you've got that connection, and you've both spoken about it. But I don't know if you can share, Lauren, what has dance meant to you, and what does it mean to you now as part of your process of being you?
Yeah, I actually get quite emotional about dance. I think when I did ayahuasca, it was kind of I become quite a people pleaser in my life, as many of us are, and through that lost a sense of myself or what I wanted, and ayahuasca really put me in touch with that person, like, and some self-compassion. And about a year after ayahuasca, I felt I was losing that a little bit again, or wasn't sure. And I went to an ecstatic dance, and it was almost immediate going back into that conversation with the self. And I felt the music just moving my body and showing me to myself. Kind of, it really put me in touch with a repressed kind of just pieces, anger, sensuality, things that I was ashamed of really could come out through the dance. So it was cathartic, but I also feel every time I dance in that way, these kind of lessons come up in the same way that I experienced with psychedelics. And I think it's there's so much research now about the mind-body connection, and movement meditation is such a good way to explore that. And for me, it's just been the easiest way to get in contact with true self and desires and acceptance. And yeah, I just love it so much. And it's something that I always have. No one can kind of take it away. I don't need anything for it. I just can dance in my living room with music and feel that.
Thanks, Lauren. Yeah, and you've mentioned breathwork as well. There's been some of your most powerful, holotropic or psychedelic, non-ordinary states of consciousness that you've encountered. So it's really important, isn't it, as part of this work, that it's not just about taking medicine and kind of having more of it. It's how to open up that window, and I don't think of it all the time as a neuroplastic window, but it's not just neuro, it's this kind of body plastic window or soul plastic window. And that dance can kind of really open that up. For me, dance is my number one thing as well. And just to share, like I was thinking about, I used to hate dancing, and then I was in London, as it happens, a friend's 20th birthday party in this quite dangerous kind of, what was it, that music called garage music, if you know what that is. About
Yeah.
25 years ago, I suppose. And he happened to have some powder that he and his friends were sharing. So I had some for the, not the first time, but on the dance floor, it was the first time that I ever really danced. And I just kind of went to the corner of this dance floor. All my other mates were just talking about football and other rubbish, and so I just went and danced for a couple of hours by myself. And it was at that moment I realized, wow, this is music, and oh, this is my body, and this is what happens when my body dances to music. And since that moment, I've just loved dancing, and I do it kind of all the time, and all my mates take the piss out of me because I just love to kind of frolic around, and it keeps me alive, to be honest. So it's that window that's open. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, I think that's like so important with we live in a really distracted society, and I think the I don't know if the like barriers to getting to that space of real like openness and connectedness are high. So one thing that psychedelics can be great for is opening the door so that you know what that space feels like, and then when you dance, when I dance now, I'm like, it's familiar space because it was open to me through psychedelics, right? And same with the breath work, I think. And you could, of course, yeah, you can get there through diligence and practice, but it's hard. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Thanks, Lauren. And Anya, I don't know if you frolic around as a dancer as well, but you're welcome to share if you do. But I wanted to ask you about filmmaking, and you mentioned the documentary, the kind of film that you're making. What's that part of you, like that? Yeah, that piece of you that makes and creates.
Yeah, well, I've always been a creative type. Just creating films, creating music at some point for a short while, not very successfully, creating graphic design, photography. It's always been expressing myself somehow. Um, I do dance as well. I dance a lot actually, and yeah, it's one of my favorite pastimes. I think I like dancing the most actually, and filmmaking will be the second. But what I like in filmmaking is, especially documentary filmmaking, is just capturing people's stories, because we see that, for example, research, data, none of this changes any people's minds or doesn't change laws often, at least in the UK, but really powerful story, of healing, or really powerful of not healing and actually highlighting the problems, usually can change so much more than protesting and campaigning and all of that stuff. I mean, campaigning, of course, you still campaign with this kind of content. So just always wanted people from unprivileged backgrounds to be heard. I am an immigrant to this country, and I had my fair share of being paid less than the rest on the team, or not getting a job because being Polish, or being called names on the street and asked to go back home. I had fair share of that. And I kind of really feel the need to help unheard voices being heard. So this is what drives me the most, I suppose, in filmmaking.
Hmm. And do you want to talk more about the film that you're working on, that you've been working on for quite some time? Tell us about it, and how's it shaping up?
Sure, a Psychedelic Renaissance, 5-year project now. It's it's been changing together with this changing landscape of psychedelics. We started off as a big campaign of removing the stigma and campaigning for legalization and just psychedelics are great. And now we're ending up being like kind of a harm reduction manual and a warning against mainstreaming, shadows of mainstreaming. And so the conversation changed. So one of the people I followed from the start was Rose Watts, and that's how actually we became friends through this documentary. And I remember when I met her, she was already quite, oh, there's some things that we need to address, psychedelic narcissism, guru problems. They stopped those problems, but it was just the beginning, and there was a lot of good stuff. And as we go in time in the movie, we see Rose changing actually, and we see in her head being more careful with how she speaks about psychedelics, and her saying that it's more opening the gates, and the actual real work is on the other side, which is integration, therapy, community, nature connectedness, all those things. So the documentary changed together with people that are in it, and Ross is one of the main characters. That's why I made example of her. But it also happens with me. I'm in the film. Um, there's other voices that I interview 5 years in between or 3 years in between, and we see how those people changed and how this movement developed in those 5 really quick years, I would say, because the acceleration of the Renaissance was quite surprising to us all, to be honest.
Yeah, that's really interesting that the documentary itself or the film itself is kind of a historical record of the Renaissance blooming, in the different stages it's gone through. And it's like, yeah, character development and plot twists, how the last 5 years have gone by. And it's amazing that, yeah, you're talking about how you've changed, maybe as a response to what's happening, as well as your own internal experience. And so someone like Ros Watt, it's great to have that kind of recognition there, because we are inextricably linked to kind of our cultural, societal container. And so we're responding to what we see. And you mentioned something like the shadow side of mainstreaming.
Yeah.
Yeah, do you want to? I don't know how much of the film is going to be about that, but could you talk a wee bit about what that means and the concern there?
Sure. So it all started with Compass Pathways trying to patent elements of psychedelic therapy. I mean, I'm not going to even speak about their trying to patent psilocybin on its own. That's maybe less of my concern, but them trying to patent things like high quality music setup or soft furnishing and holding hands with therapists. It kind of make me think what's happening here. Psychedelics are not just like some capitalistic commodity. This is something that we have to use together to address those crises that we have in the society. And I started getting worried about accessibility, as I already mentioned. £5,000 for ketamine session is like extortionately a lot of money for people on low income in this country. So lack of reciprocity, I started noticing. There's loads of very rich people coming to the scene, and they organize great conferences and symposiums, and you see all this money flowing in, a lot of companies. But actually, I see that a lot of them don't address grassroots organizations or indigenous communities to make sure that it's done respectful way, and that there's reciprocity, that scientists, indigenous people are not left behind, and they benefit from this mainstreaming as well, and that we care about diversity, and it's not just white boys club, because it's becoming, and this is very worrying to me. And also another thing, I believe this focusing on the medical model, on the biological aspect, that psychedelics reset your brain and it's magic medicine. Media everywhere, left and right, magic medicine is going to save your life. How it impacts my life is that I have 2 people a day uh, desperate to take psychedelics on their own without a sitter because they have depression or complex PTSD. And that worries me because they have no sitter, no preparation, no integration, and they're just going to do it because they heard it's good for them, because all media now from being negatively biased. Now everybody's positively biased. So this hype, and I think there's lack of education and lack of balanced narrative around psychedelics, and actually teaching people about possible side effects. There are re-traumatization, psychotic attack. You can get those things. There are negative side effects. And also there's very zero focus on integration on community, because that is not good for capitalist market. You don't make money on community. It's very difficult, at least. So I think those are the major issues I have with it now. And I'm looking forward for those big organizations to look back at the community and community's needs and work with the patients and hear the patient's voice. People that came from studies like Saipan with wonderful Leonie Schneider, also part of my documentary, and really hear the patients and community's voice in all of this, and not make it just another luxury product for people.
Amazing. Thank you, Anya.
Thank you. Sorry for a rant. I just rant about this always.
Each of those, you said about a dozen things there, each of them deserves, really going more deeply into it. So yeah, and we can do that now. I want to just check, Lauren, any of those pieces or any other pieces for you that concern you or you think that we should be mindful of?
No, I mean, all of it. I think the biggest challenge is that things are happening so quickly that it's hard to have like a strategic response to this, because on a grassroots level, we're not really like prepared to fight the fight against people who have tons of money and influence and connections. And it actually, the thing it's bringing up for me is this idea of us as a Teal or an aspiring Teal organization, which means that we are, I guess this Teal framework is about the evolutionary context of organizations, and that really to evolve, we need to, we can't operate in the way that we used to. Anya, maybe you can explain Teal a little bit better. But that's kind of how, as a society, we need to be in order to deal with psychedelics. These are extremely nuanced things. Our society isn't really built for nuance. It's built for good and bad and quick things. And so that this is why this job is so mammoth, is we're trying to change a societal mindset around what it means to heal and be connected, and trying to fit. That's when psychedelics will work, right? Is when we are coming together and understanding them together and embracing the difficulties and nuances of them. Yeah.
Thank you. And a part of that is society changing itself to better kind of contain psychedelics, rather than having to fit psychedelics into this medical model or this capitalist model. It's actually, the psychedelics teach us that, well, actually our model and our structured societies are sick and broken and unfair and unjust, and they need to change. But it's happening so quickly. It's a really good point, Lauren. Anya, just coming back to you, what other thoughts did you want to kind of go deeper into?
From what we just said, whichever you feel like. I can talk about all of them.
Yeah, well, I mean, I'd forgotten that Compass Pathways is based in London. I know they've kind of New York, London, the two of them, and they do get quite a beating when it comes to this psychedelic capitalism model. But I know there's a lot of companies out there that are grabbing the patents, the IP. They're quite aggressive. Quite a few companies that are, in different parts of the world that are trying to get to market first. And I'm sure not all of them will succeed. Some of them will go down in flames. But we do want, I do want some of these companies to succeed. So I'm a big fan of Awaken. I think that they're doing really good work in England, and because I've worked in addiction quite a lot. The outcomes that they're having, their phase 2 trials, are just phenomenal, just ridiculous compared to what I had, when I was a director of an outpatient clinic. And same with, you look at psilocybin as well, or MDMA for PTSD. So the potential of this is huge. So we're going to need some kind of mass clinical financial beast to get it to the start line. But who's going to be bloody driving it,
Yeah, well, that's a common argument I hear. and I have no problem with it. I agree. I'm just asking, where is the accessibility? Awaken Ketamine Clinic charges £5,000 for a session. Where are the bursaries for people from unprivileged backgrounds? Where are the scholarships? So this is kind of what we're asking here. We're encouraging the big boys to come with their money, but we encourage them to also remember about patients and integration and grassroots organizations and supporting people who were in this space for a long time, because we actually pick up their patients after their studies, and we help their patients to not crash psychologically after, again, having this glimmer of hope and then having it taken away. We pick up their mess after them. So we're just asking reciprocity, come to us, help us, support us. That's our call, basically. And also, we're looking forward for someone who will have more accessible access. In states you have USONA that offers psilocybin for free to researchers. Compass charges extreme amount of money for their work, for example. I don't know, obviously, how Awaken take where they take their psilocybin from. I'm not aware of that. I'm not sure if you know, but yeah, I'm looking for, what we hope for is more philanthropists and organizations who will try to make those procedures cheaper for people and more accessible.
And how about maybe just looking at the British landscape for drug policy reforms and having this mainstreamed in the NHS, the National Health Service? Because that's what we're talking about, it having it accessible. So if it's included in the NHS, I guess that's the goal, the dream. So anyone can get it from their local doctor or get a referral for it. So where are things at the moment, just around kind of drug policy and reforms and what people are advocating for in Britain?
It's terrible. That's one word, but then we can go into details. As I told you a moment ago, when I came to this country 18 years ago, we had psilocybin was available to buy on the street in the market in Camden legally. We had cannabis class C, and then they declassified cannabis Sunday class B and psilocybin class A. You can't buy it at all, no medical use. Cannabis also no medical use, which is funny because obviously, for example, cannabis is legalized medically in the UK. So as a patient, you should be able to get it from your GP. But in the last, I think, 2 years, I'm not sure, I think it's 2 years, only 3 GP prescriptions were made for cannabis, which is outrageous. And most people who use cannabis in this country take it from private clinics. So they need to, again, pay loads of money for access to private clinic. So with psilocybin and psychedelics, I feel like it's becoming the same problem, that GPs are not going to be keen to be prescribing those things. And there's a massive work that great organizations we have here in UK, we have Transform, Release, Drug Science. They're doing loads of work to talk to the officials and government and liaise about it and inform them, show them what are the alternatives to prohibition, what are the systems better than prohibition, also how to organize addiction centers, that are not based on criminalizing people, but actually helping people and all those things. They're working super hard, but we're like, there's no response. And Labour Party in the UK, they have some kind of drug policy, but it's like hardly anything there. The Conservatives, they have Conservative Drug Reform Party, and they started this psilocybin access right campaign. So if anybody from UK listens to us, PAR, psilocybin access right campaign, please do sign it. So this is happening. But we're thinking 5-10 years before psilocybin will be legalized, and probably for medical use, and we're probably looking at psilocybin first, and then maybe at some point MDMA. But right now the focus is to make the GPs prescribe cannabis, which is already legal. So it's a big struggle. It's unfortunately not as easy as in the US. Changing the law is not, as decriminalized movement, we can't do such a thing because our legal system is completely different. So we're just waiting, and a lot of people are lobbying. Let's see what CDPRG can do. We're
Mm.
hopeful, but also a bit hopeless.
Yeah, it sounds
I,
frustrating.
Very frustrating.
I don't know. I
Obviously, I
left.
know that
Yeah.
UK is the biggest producer of cannabis in Europe, and most of it goes abroad. You know what I mean? So this is crazy stuff. Theresa May, who was our prime minister, her husband has shares in a company that sells Sativex, which is a cannabis product, and yet that woman, and her government kept cannabis illegal. So it's a lot of corruption here with drug policy, and massive wall to demolish basically for us as a community. Sorry, Lauren, to talk over you, but yeah, needed to share that one.
No, I mean, I feel it is like it's dire currently, but it does feel like things are shifting because so many actors are pushing. I feel like the positive media coverage is really good and continuing. Um, the research is happening, although that's like a real place that we can push is supporting groups that are doing research, because I think we're one of these roadblocks is the government saying we need more research in order to do this, but we won't pay for the research, so you have to get privately funded research. So definitely trying to get philanthropists interested in proving efficacy so that these changes can be made. It is difficult in the UK because it's a slow moving beast. Um, and I think with something like getting it in the National Health Service, uh, yeah, you're just looking at like some major roadblocks, and it's such a shame. And I think, but again, education is so powerful, and many social movements have happened way more quickly than we thought they would. So I kind of maintain hope. Yeah.
Yeah, precarious. It's
Yeah.
a bit hopeless, but we have to maintain hope. And you said there's some very
Yeah. Yeah.
inspiring leaders in England. Rosalind Watts, we've mentioned a few times, but also David Nutt, who's at Awaken and kind of drug science as well. So, and he's famous for when he was part of that kind of committee, looking at drug laws in England, I think in the late 90s, early 2000s. And you're saying that, all drugs should be descheduled, and if it's safer than horse riding, in which case, as horse riding is legal, so should drug use be legal, not criminalized. So do you work much with David Nutt? Is he part of the voices right now that are kind of advocating for this?
Yes, or just to comment on what you said, he was part of that group, and after saying that, he was kicked out of that group because the government didn't want to take it as the truth. So Professor Nutt lost his job over this, lost one of his roles. We work closely with drug science. One of our team members, Max Houston, is actually, I think she's comms lead in drug science, and she works on Project 21, and they were heavily involved in our drug policy symposium. We hosted David Nutt at event twice already. I think he was actually at one of the first, or the launch event of Psychedelic Society 2014. He was the first speaker from what I remember. I was not, I didn't manage to get to that talk because it sold out so quickly. It was 400 seats and it just sold out. So massive success for Stephen Reed there, 2014. Thank you, Stephen, or something like that. I don't know actually which year it was, the talk itself. But so yeah, we do a lot of work with drug science. We work with most organizations in UK because what we find, only when we unite we can make a change. And it's interesting because at Drug Policy Symposium we had the conservatives and the lefties and some really radical lefties. And it was lovely atmosphere, and people talked together and respected each other's views. It was a nice example of how people can unite if they don't have maybe too controversial views on life, how they can unite even though they have differences, because there's a common goal and something they really believe in, which is legalizing, decriminalizing psychedelics and all drugs,
Yeah.
most of them at least.
And I felt like all of the speakers and our panel at the end was focusing on what you can do as an audience member, just someone who's passionate about this, to keep the movement going. So there's like, you can volunteer, but you can also just, write into politicians or support these organizations. I can't remember what the last one said, but anyway, it's nice to
Email your
feel.
MP. Mail your MP. That's the most important one.
Email your member of parliament. Yeah.
Yeah, put pressure on them.
Yeah, it was also interesting in that one. We had what was his name, Anya, the undercover cop?
Neil Woods, who was a former undercover cop in the UK.
So
he's great.
His perspective was good.
He's a founder of LEAP, which is Legal Enforcement Against Prohibition, and it's a bunch of cops that decided that war on drugs is ridiculous. Neil Woods actually has a great story, which I'll quickly say. He was undercover in a gang, drug gang in the UK county lines for I think a year or two. It was extremely long time. He really got into character. He managed to climb very high to the top boy, so called, and he had his life being risked. Like he had a knife against his groin on one occasion, so he had to be really tough and play the role. And all these 2 years or a year of hard work, they arrested the gang, they went to prison, great. Week later, there was another gang running the same neighborhood. So he just thought, okay, so I just spent a year or whatever of my life for nothing, for other competition to take over. So he started this legal enforcement thing against prohibition, and they work with government, the campaign, education, and just give talks and talk how ridiculous this war is. So a really cool person to follow, Neil Woods, I can recommend. That's a character, very good character.
Yeah. And I guess that perspective of, we often talk about like the healing properties of psychedelics and the potential, but also just the needless waste and violence and all the other things that come with illegal drugs. And he made this wonderful point about this, the drug policy crisis is so linked to the climate crisis, and really these movements can come together because it's all driven by greed and capitalism and doing things at the expense of the environment. And so we should keep in mind that these aren't just like nice to have these drugs legalized. It's actually creating an immense amount of it comes at a huge cost, creating a lot of harm.
Yeah, thanks for mentioning that. It's important, Lauren, because I know sometimes we can forget that all drugs are criminalized right now, and that kind of psychedelic exceptionalism doesn't mean that ayahuasca or cannabis, LSD is better or inherently different. It's just so it's really important that drug policy itself is looked at here, not just around kind of psychedelic research trials. And that's huge over here in America. We actually just had, from a harm reduction perspective, which I know you're both into, and you mentioned that before as well, Anya. From a harm reduction perspective here in America, we actually had our first safe injection site open up in New York City. And again, I don't think that's federal. I think that's just a city thing, because they're like, we need to do this because so many people are dying from fentanyl, because heroin's illegal, and so people are just buying whatever they can get and not testing it, and it's incredibly lethal. That's the war on drugs action there, and it's very successful. People always say to me, the war on drugs is very successful at doing what it's supposed to do, which is putting people in prison, kind of shutting them off from society, and people dying.
Yeah, and they say about drugs, the most dangerous thing about them is that you can get caught with them by police and in prison. So yeah, we are very jealous of safe injection sites. This is something we really want in the UK, and we'll keep campaigning for that. But that's fantastic news.
Yeah, America's very big, so there's definitely pockets of really wonderful things happening. Oregon, for example, with psilocybin, and in Colorado. So some definitely good examples. But I guess England's a bit smaller. Is everything focused in London, or are there little kind of communities spread out throughout Britain?
We have Bristol community, and there's this like Totnes kind of by the sea community building now. So there are little pockets of little towns. A lot of people, especially during COVID, actually moved out of London, and now half of our team is not actually living in London, so it's mostly Zoom meetings now. But still, event-wise, it's mostly London now.
Yeah, it's actually kind of interesting how they map onto like, I mean, England, I've been learning the last couple of years. It has this super rich pagan history, and a lot of that native, I mean, mushrooms are native here, and a lot of that kind of land and medicine wisdom was lost with maybe witch trials or just the crushing of those communities. But I think you see pockets, yeah, in Devon, in Wales, that are historically spiritual places that right now the psychedelic communities are congregating around. So you have a lot of people living. There's like, yeah, I would say 4 or 5. Then plus just like more liberal cities like Bristol and London and right.
I love that. Actually, I want to mention Emma Farrell first of all. She was on our episode about a month or so ago, number 305, and she's an English practitioner that has a plant medicine connection with the spirits of English trees and plants. And so she was reeling off all of these really common, herbs or plants or weeds and trees and things that just grow all over Britain. And she's talking about them from a spiritual perspective, and kind of how the spirit of those organic entities, speak to her. And I also just wanted to ask a question as well. I guess around England, and we've mentioned kind of climate change a few times. You mentioned Totnes as a place, and I've been there just once or twice, and I almost moved there when I was in my kind of hardcore hippie days. And it's a really special town, particularly because I don't know if you know about the transition town movement. So Totnes was I think what Britain's first transition town, which is this kind of organizational structure to move a community, a town, city, village, whatever it might be, from being reliant on fossil fuels and imports from overseas to being self-reliant on kind of renewable power, on kind of trading within the community, kind of like a green dollars, kind of trading and bartering, and having more locally produced foods. So yeah, Totnes is really special for that. And I'm just sensing that there's such a connection between psychedelics and the climate crisis, and kind of this love of spirit, Mother Nature and humanity, that I think that kind of shadow side of the capitalist psychedelic model isn't going to pick up on, because it is not necessarily going to make money. But it's really there, but we have to build it. And I love that you're building it. You are builders, kind of with your sleeves rolled up, building. And you get, you channel the anger as well, which is great, because anger is a really important piece of getting shit done. But there's a lot of love and grace as well, kind of blended in with the work that you're doing.
Thank you. Would you like to write a review of all
Yes,
for
that's
us?
my testimonial.
Sounds great.
No, but it's great. You're carrying quite a weight on your shoulders as well. Like, as England's, there's not many other organizations I sense doing what you're doing. There's drug science you mentioned. So it's quite a weight, and you're doing it, in a way that connects people together so that they find their community, so they find their meaning and find their self. So it's very bottom up, grassrootsy. And I know we mentioned before, Lauren, you were saying that you're a Teal organization, and I've never heard of that before. So I just Googled it. I don't know if you want to talk more about what it means to be a Teal organization and how it's, say, different to being like just a top-down, corporation. But if either of you feel like you just want to tell people about it, because I'm assuming I'm not the only one that's never heard of it.
Yeah, it's not such a new concept, funny enough. There are quite a lot of organizations that have been experimenting with this model without it being a thing. They just, across the world, independently started using this format of organizing. So it all starts with evolution of human consciousness and evolution of our social structures. So, to portray an example here, we're not really governed by a king anymore. We're not really into dictators, at least in most, I mean, not everywhere in the world, obviously. But then again, consciousness of a human in different parts of the world, even in one country, varies across people. So, you might have people who still have so-called more middle age consciousness, believing in religion and strict dogma and stuff. And this is all actually in this book, so I can recommend Reinventing Organizations. It's all documented there. But the gist of it is that as our consciousness changes, we also need to change our social structures, and workplace is a very important social structure that we all spend so much time in. So, Teal organization is an organization without, there's no one boss, there's no hierarchy. There are principles that we govern ourselves with or we live by, which is self management, wholeness, and evolutionary purpose. And while self management is self explanatory, but basically, that you don't have a manager, we work in teams, we identify our goals together, and work this way. There's no one to tell you what to do. Then evolutionary purpose, also quite easy. There's a purpose to the company. It's not shareholders' money that we care about. We are a purpose-driven organization. We are a cooperative, workers' cooperative, and our purpose might change with evolution of the world. We identify what is needed to be done, and we fulfill that all around psychedelics because that's our mission. But the wholeness is the interesting part in it, because we talked about wholeness before, so we're getting back to it. So most of the workplaces, what they see is that people are unhappy because of the bosses, but also because of doing things they don't want to do, and because of working with people they don't really want to work with, and because of not fulfilling their purpose and actually not using their skills or their potential to the fullest. So in Teal organization, you want people to fulfill that potential, and you want them to work with teams they want to work with and work on the projects they are passionate about, and how to and with nice working atmosphere, so your life is not disjointed, it's whole. Your work is great, your social life is good, everything feels aligned to you, so you're your true self. And how in practice to get it accomplished, it's a very broad answer. There are many things. For example, you have quite strict rules and processes, about things, so everybody knows what we're following, but those rules are created together as a team, and they're flexible. So if something stops working, there's a power for everyone can change it, not just one boss or a board or shareholders. This is simple things like starting meetings with check-ins. So every time we have a meeting, people say how they feel, because I might feel crappy on one day, and people will just be a bit more compassionate and leave me alone on the day. So just this feeling that we're a bit of a family in a way, it's not like in a creepy, cultish way, but just like we care for each other. What else? Compassionate feedback and disciplinary processes, so people are not driven by fear in them. The same with reinventing HR completely, the hiring process, onboarding. We build all those processes ourselves, but in a way, how would I like to be interviewed? How would I like to be treated? This is how we're trying to treat people. And sometimes we make mistakes. Lauren was new. She can tell you if it went well, but there's a lot of chaos. It's a lot of controlled chaos. Basically, there always chaos with the organizations. But as you grow as a team, you start building those processes, getting easier. Yeah, I think this is pretty much. I don't know, Lauren, if you have anything to add to this.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's just obviously it's such an aspiration. It's these things are really difficult to achieve. I think the Teal organization thing starts from this premise, like of the wisdom traditions, that the person's deepest calling is to achieve wholeness, and we'll never get there. And that's kind of what it feels like. Working in a Teal organization is like, we're going to try to do this, but I found it really hard coming from only corporate, or I worked in higher education at universities, and they're just like dinosaurs in terms of hierarchy and status and drama, and like it was a really tough transition. But I love the wholeness part, because I think it's about like not just having your narrow professional self. And that's why, and I think that's really what allows like what's been where we've been most successful, is that allowing people to bring in their personal, so there's just no kind of delineation between that personal and professional, and what's affecting you, what's giving you energy, this constant dialogue of like, I'm not really feeling drawn to this anymore, doing this. And we can say, okay, well, let's find someone else to do that, and you shift this. So I think that the biggest challenge is educating one another and changing our mindset to be flexible in that way. Because I mean, that's something I still struggle with. It's like, am I allowed to do that? Am I not allowed to do that? Taking ownership. Yeah.
Sounds amazing, and really good example of communication and just being real and whole. Like this, you bring your real self to work. Sounds awesome. Thanks so much for explaining about that Teal organization. And it's not spelt as in Peter Teal, it's spelt as in the color teal. Teal.
Yeah, it's a teal color. It comes from, how do you call it, Lauren? They're from red to teal?
I think it's kind of based on spiral dynamics, evolutionary psychology. Yeah, if you're familiar with that. Okay, yeah, spiral dynamics, really interesting kind of theory of consciousness and development of consciousness to look into. But yeah,
I shook my head then when she said if I had heard of spiral dynamics. It's like I shook my head. Just I need to be honest there, because if you're not watching this on YouTube, no, is that who's Spiral Dynamics by?
Is that Ken?
Because I have heard of it.
Yeah.
Ken Wilber, is it?
Oh wait, Edward Beck. Sorry.
What was their name? Sorry.
Don Edward Beck.
Don Edward Beck. Okay.
That's not. Yeah.
And it's nice how we're talking about like the personal transformation, and you spoke about like dance as this kind of fluid experience, and then we've got building community, and we've got changing society and policy, and the role of money and capitalism, and then we're talking about like just work and company structures, and they all kind of can come from the same place through dialogue, through groundedness, through being authentic with each other, and not just being after just the money for yourself. This could in theory work, but yeah, it takes a lot of work from what you're saying, and it's a little bit chaotic, and it's a big transition from the old ways of being and conceptualizing reality.
It is, but it's a necessary one. If you think about human body having 3 brains, and one being your brain and your head and your heart and your guts, and working together on homeostasis and making it work, this kind of makes you feel that organization needs that too. And actually, as much as it's challenging, I feel it's such a relief to not be the only responsible one, to not be the only director, to not be the only one who has to make this final terribly difficult decision, and that we can share that. It like you feel really held, I think, in a team like this, and that's what I've never ever experienced in any other workplace I've been to. So that's definitely the biggest highlight. I would encourage everyone to look into organizing like that. It's not easy, comes with challenges, but it's really rewarding, and it's more democratic, and everybody feels more included and like part of family, and people don't just think how they should leave and find another job after a few months. So that's a good thing.
Yeah. Amazing. Thank you. So we'll put some things in the show notes about the Teal organization. Before we sign off, because we have been going on for a while, and I've loved talking to you, and I definitely want to come to England and meet you and do something together over there, like some kind of event. So we'll talk more about that. But before we sign out, do one of you want to just tell everyone kind of where they can find out about Psychedelic Society if they're interested to find out more, and also about the film that you're working on that I think you're raising funds for?
Do you want to talk about society, Lauren? I can jump in.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So you can find us online, psychedelicsociety.org.uk. We put on lots of events online and in person, so I definitely would welcome anyone to check those out. And if you feel like supporting us or getting involved in our closer membership community, membership starts at like £5 a month. We have 3 levels. So it's a really lovely community, and we kind of try to build it around those same kind of Teal principles of collaboration and wholeness. And yeah, it's just beautiful. So see you there.
And also follow us on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram if you're on those. We try to produce content that's not just promotional, but also a lot of useful content, articles, and harm reduction resources. So yeah, definitely follow us on social. And with the documentary, it's we are currently fundraising to finish editing. The documentary is fully shot, partly edited. I think we're looking into raising $40,000 as a maximum. It's a scalable project, so whatever we raise will help to get it to the line. We are currently fundraising on GoFundMe, but you can access it through our website. Sorry for the noise. I'm going to turn it off. So yeah, we're currently crowdfunding on GoFundMe, but you can access it through our website, which is the psychedelicrenaissance.com. And also just Googling Psychedelic Renaissance documentary, GoFundMe, and people can support us that way.
Wonderful. Okay, so once again, this has been an absolute pleasure. I was looking forward to talking to you and hearing about your wonderful work. So thank you so much for coming on. Any final thoughts just to say goodbye that you want to leave with our audience?
Be safe and be joyous and be present. And to you, David, thanks for having us, and come hang out with us in London for sure.
Yeah. I really enjoyed this conversation, especially where we ended about these things scaling up and really crossing all these different spheres of life. I think when we start looking at the trauma we hold in ourselves and the way it's mirrored in the trauma of society and in the environment, it can be really instructive. So I think that's something I'm going to meditate on after this conversation. So I appreciate that. Feeling very inspired.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you. All right. Well, this has been another Psychedelics Today podcast with David Rapkin. And today we were speaking to Lauren Katalinich and Anya Oleksiuk from the Psychedelic Society of England. Thanks so much. Bye, everyone.